My name is Ashikaga Takauji. I am 28 years old. I am a general serving under the shogun. It is now the spring of the year 1333. I am in Japan, in Kamakura, the political heart of the shogunate. Today, I stand ready to inspect my loyal troops. By order of the shogun, we will soon march to this nation's capital, Kyoto, to suppress a massive uprising. Yet what unsettles me deeply is this. The source of this rebellion is none other than the Emperor of Japan himself. Why would the Emperor, the highest sovereign of the realm, rise up in rebellion against his own samurai? What am I to do? And what choice will our protagonist, Ashikaga Takauji, ultimately make? How will this uprising, ignited by the Emperor himself, come to an end? Let us begin today's story. As we enter the 14th century, Japan is under the rule of the Kamakura Shogunate. This island nation has two supreme rulers, the Emperor and the Shogun. In theory, the Emperor is Japan's highest authority, but in practice, true power rests firmly in the hands of the Shogun, commander of the samurai. Yet during the Kamakura period, matters are even more complicated. Not long after the shogunate was established, the seat of ultimate power shifted within its own walls. A series of internal conflicts within the shogun's family, the Minamoto clan, led to the extinction of its direct heirs. Seizing the moment, the Hojo clan, the shogunate's most powerful vassal family, propped up puppet shoguns with no blood ties to the Minamoto and claimed real power for themselves. Thus, in this time, it is the Hojo, and specifically their leader Hojo Takatoki, who stands as Japan's true ruler. Emperors and shoguns come and go, but only the Hojo remain, the unchallenged center of authority. An emperor and a shogun, both mere puppets of their retainers, such is the unique paradox of Japanese history. Since 1203, the Hojo have dominated the shogunate for over a century, their rule appearing as unshakable as ever. But now a crisis begins to stir. To protect the power they had seized from the shogun, the Hojo clan knew it was vital to secure loyal support. To this end, they divided the samurai class across the realm into two groups, the Gokenin and the Myuchibito. The Gokenin were samurai who pledged their loyalty directly to the shogun, in name at least. The Myuchibito, however, swore fealty only to the Hojo, the true masters behind the shogunate. Naturally, the Myuchibito were far fewer in number. Yet these few, who served only the Hojo, received privileged access to wealth and rewards. Above all, land. The Hojo family and their closest retainers claimed for themselves Japan's richest and most fertile territories. This blatant favoritism stirred growing resentment among the far more numerous Gokenin. To make matters worse, Japan had already faced two major invasions in recent memory, in 1274 and again in 1281. On both occasions, the Mongols were miraculously repelled. Lords and samurai across the land were mobilized to defend the realm, but the cost was devastating. Yet, unlike foreign campaigns, these defensive wars yielded no spoils to reward the warriors who had fought bravely. The Hojo clan, who held the reins of power as the shogunate's regents, offered nothing from their own lands to compensate the losses. As a result, many lords and samurai who had answered the call to arms found themselves ruined, their sacrifices unrewarded. Resentment toward the Hojo spread swiftly among the warrior class. Bit by bit, the very foundations of their rule began to crack. These cracks in the shogunate's power did not go unnoticed by one man, the nominal ruler of Japan himself, Emperor Go-Daigo. Emperor Go-Daigo was 45 years old. He saw in this unrest a rare chance to reclaim what had once belonged to the throne. It was with the rise of the Kamakura Shogunate that the emperor had truly lost all real power. Backed by their samurai armies, the shoguns controlled the land, the taxes, and the right to distribute both, leaving the emperor as little more than a ceremonial figurehead. For over a century, the imperial line had been stripped of any real authority. To the emperors of these generations, the shogunate was nothing less than a band of usurpers who had stolen rightful power from their hands. Each new emperor yearned to take it back. To them, an imperial rebellion was not just understandable, it was inevitable. Yet for an emperor with almost no land and no army, launching a rebellion was nearly impossible. There had been attempts before. Just recall the Jokyu War of 1221, when a former emperor dared to rise and was decisively defeated. That defeat made clear one harsh truth. Without military might, the emperor's hope of reclaiming power was hopeless. But these past failures did not and could not deter Emperor Go-Daigo. He was unlike any emperor before, a man of bold action and unwavering resolve. Go-Daigo would become one of the most determined emperors in Japan's history to seize back real power. Beyond restoring imperial authority, he was deeply dissatisfied with the very system that dictated imperial succession. To prevent conflicts within the royal family, the Hojo had once imposed the system of Ryotol Tetsuritsu, an arrangement where two rival imperial lines would take turns on the throne. Under this arrangement, Go-Daigo's own descendants would be denied their place as future emperors. For Go-Daigo, it was intolerable that an emperor himself could not even choose his own heir, and so he decided to act. Go-Daigo began reaching out to lords and samurai across Japan, to those who nursed grudges against the shogunate. His goal was clear: to unite these discontented forces and ignite a rebellion that would shake the shogunate to its core. Yet toppling the shogunate was no simple feat. Just 2 years before the events of our story, in September of 1331, Emperor Go-Daigo's secret plot to overthrow the Kamakura shogunate was uncovered. With little time to muster his forces, Go-Daigo's poorly organized imperial army had no chance against the shogunate's superior might. In less than a month, the rebellion was crushed. Loyal ministers and lords who had sided with the emperor were swiftly executed. The surviving samurai scattered into hiding. Even Emperor Go-Daigo himself was captured. Stripped of his throne, he was exiled for life to the remote, wind-swept Oki Islands in the Sea of Japan, far from the main islands. Though the shogunate dared not execute an emperor outright, they wasted no time replacing him. The Hojo accelerated their policy of alternating the throne between rival lines. A new emperor, Kogon, was installed to take Go-Daigo's place, a puppet under the shogunate's firm hand. On the surface, it seemed the Hojo and their shogunate had secured a decisive victory, but deep beneath this triumph, embers of rebellion still smoldered, ready to ignite once more. History would prove that Go-Daigo's defiance could not be buried so easily. November 1332, in the rugged mountains south of Kyoto, Kusunoki Masashige, a loyalist commander, rallied his forces and rose in rebellion once again. The flames of war were rekindled. When the shogunate moved to crush him, an even greater shock appeared. In February of 1333, Emperor Go-Daigo, with the help of secret sympathizers, escaped his lonely exile on Oki Island and set foot on Japanese soil again. Go-Daigo made his way to the steep, forested slopes of Mount Hiei, north of Kyoto. There, he found sanctuary within the Buddhist monasteries. The shogunate now understood this was no ordinary uprising. Repeated rebellions and the emperor's astonishing return threatened the very survival of their regime. Hojo Takatoki, the true master of the shogunate, resolved to crush this crisis once and for all. He ordered a new campaign of ruthless suppression, vowing to spare no effort and no mercy. This time, every rebel, including Emperor Go-Daigo himself, would be punished without exception. Let us look closer at Japan in February 1333. The forces loyal to Emperor Go-Daigo were scattered, yet fiercely determined. South of Kyoto, in the rugged mountains of Chihaya, some 60 kilometers from the capital, Kusunoki Masashige commanded the most tenacious rebel force. Kusunoki held a mountain fortress named Chihaya Castle. Though numbering no more than 2,000 men, their presence so close to Kyoto kept the shogunate on constant edge. Meanwhile, Emperor Go-Daigo and his supporters had gathered around Mount Hiei to the north. From these forested slopes, they launched guerrilla raids that tied down the shogunate's armies. Go-Daigo's cause was sustained by the temple communities and a handful of local samurai. But even here, their numbers barely reached 2,000. To the west of Kyoto, about 50 kilometers away in Harima province, more spark of rebellion was ignited. There, another figure resentful of the shogunate, the Akamatsu clan, gathered 2,000 warriors to rise against its rule. Small as these uprisings were, the rebels knew their strength did not lie in numbers, but in the terrain and in time itself. In mountain strongholds, they could strike and vanish, forcing the shogunate into costly campaigns of attrition. Their plan was simple: survive, delay, and spread the spark of rebellion to every samurai discontent with Hojo rule. And with every passing day, time was not on the shogunate's side. The shogunate's master, Hojo Takatoki, knew he had to act decisively. He resolved to crush the uprisings once and for all, and this time he would unleash the full might of his armies. At this moment, Japan's two most important cities, Kamakura and Kyoto, were both heavily garrisoned. In Kyoto alone, the shogunate could muster up to 50,000 soldiers, ready to stamp out any threat to their rule. In Kamakura, the shogunate's eastern bastion, another 20,000 troops stood waiting. In total, Hojo Takatoki commanded a force of up to 70,000 warriors, all led by his own clan and their closest retainers. In December 1332, he gave the order. In Kyoto, 20,000 shogunate soldiers would march south to Chihaya Castle to crush Kusunoki Masashige and his mountain holdouts as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, a second force, 10,000 strong, would encircle the emperor himself in the northern mountains near Mount Hiei. The rugged terrain made a direct assault costly, so they planned to blockade first, then strike when Kusunoki was gone. Finally, 5,000 troops would head west to Harima province to stamp out the Akamatsu uprising before it could spread. When these deployments were complete, Emperor Go-Daigo's fragile rebellion seemed destined to fail, like so many before it. Yet there was one detail worth noting. Even after these armies moved out, Kyoto would still be guarded by around 15,000 shogunate troops, a force large enough to keep order, but more weak than before. Just 2 months later, news reached Kamakura that would shake Hojo Takatoki's regime to its core. The shogunate's massive armies around Kyoto had failed on every front. In the mountains near Chihaya Castle, Kusunoki Masashige's outnumbered loyalists refused to yield. They turned steep passes and forests into deadly traps for the shogunate's 20,000 troops. By the end of January 1333, the mighty army of Hojo had not broken through. Elsewhere, it was no better. The rebels melted into hills and forests, striking and vanishing before the shogunate could force them into open battle. At night, messengers slipped through mountain passes and temple courtyards. Rumors spread that Emperor Go-Daigo was reaching out to more lords across the realm, hoping to turn silent resentment into open revolt. Time was slipping away. Hojo Takatoki knew it. More troops were needed. The Hojo's own forces might no longer be enough. So his gaze turned to the powerful families still nominally loyal to the shogunate, regional lords with private armies and vast lands. Among them was a young commander, just 28 years old, the very man we met at the start of this story, Ashikaga Takauji. The Ashikaga clan was no ordinary house. They were a cadet branch of the Minamoto, the same noble line that gave Japan its first shogun. Because of this bloodline, the Ashikaga were seen as the second most prestigious samurai family in the land. When the Minamoto first built the Kamakura shogunate over a century before, the Ashikaga's support had been vital. In return, they gained vast estates spread across the provinces, enough to raise tens of thousands of warriors if they wished. By any measure, they were among Japan's most powerful clans. But there was a complication. The Ashikaga were gokenin, direct vassals of the shogun, not Miuchi-bito, who pledged loyalty solely to the Hojo regents. From the Hojo's perspective, the Ashikaga's true allegiance was uncertain. Would they obey the Hojo as they obeyed the shogun, or see themselves as rivals for power? For decades, the Hojo had tried to keep the Ashikaga in check, squeezing their influence, keeping them at arm's length from the shogunate's inner circle. At the same time, they bound them closer through marriage and diplomacy. Ashikaga Takauji himself had married into the Hojo family, a clever move to tie him to the ruling clan. So far, the Ashikaga had shown no sign of open rebellion. But in truth, no one could say where their true loyalties lay. For now, the Hojo had little choice but to trust them. Kyoto was in chaos. Messengers arrived one after another, pleading for reinforcements to crush the spreading revolt. In Kamakura, Hojo still had 20,000 loyal troops, but a fresh uprising could break out in the eastern provinces at any moment. Leaving the heartland unguarded was out of the question. So, in early February 1333, Hojo Takatoki made his decision. He would call upon the Ashikaga. Takauji and his clan would march west to put down the emperor's rebellion. Yet the Hojo did not dare trust them with the main campaign. So they gave them what seemed a secondary target, the uprising in Harima province, where the Akamatsu clan had declared for Emperor Go-Daigo. When the order reached Takauji, he hesitated for days. Then came his reply. He would obey. The Ashikaga began to muster their men. Banners were raised. Swords were polished. By March 1333, Takauji took command. Around 3,000 elite warriors marched under his banner, heading west toward Kyoto. Everything seemed to follow the Hojo's plan. By mid-March, Takauji's force reached Mikawa province, about 150 kilometers from Kyoto. There they paused. This too was Ashikaga land, a perfect place to rest and gather strength. Waiting in Mikawa was another 9,000 local warriors loyal to the clan. They joined Takauji's column, swelling his ranks to 12,000. The Ashikaga had prepared well. Their army was growing and ready. By early April, Takauji reached Harima province west of Kyoto. According to the plan, he would soon join the local shogunate forces and crush the Akamatsu uprising. But was that really his plan? In April 1333, Ashikaga Takauji stood before his assembled army for one final inspection. In that moment, he spoke words that would shake Japan's political order to its core. To uphold the emperor and destroy the traitors. With this, Takauji openly joined Emperor Go-Daigo's rebellion. This was no sudden betrayal, but a carefully planned uprising. Long before he left Kamakura, Takauji had likely made secret arrangements with the exiled emperor. Unlike the scattered guerrilla bands the shogunate faced before, Takauji commanded a real army, well-led, well-armed, and dangerously close to Kyoto. Worse for the Hojo, his betrayal came with almost no warning. The shogunate's forces in Kyoto were completely unprepared. The final crisis for the Hojo had begun. Within days, Takauji's army struck from the west, launching a surprise assault on the unsuspecting Bakufu forces in Kyoto. The 15,000 shogunate troops were caught off guard. Within days, they were routed. Takauji's men swept into Kyoto. They seized Emperor Kogon, the puppet ruler installed by the Hojo. The shogunate's hold on the capital crumbled quickly. Realizing which way the wind was blowing, the local warriors turned against the shogunate and joined the Ashikaga army. Takauji's force, once 12,000 strong, had now swelled to 50,000. Poised to strike from behind at the shogunate troops still pinned down in the hills. The shattered Hojo forces fled in chaos. Harried by Takauji's vanguard and local rebel bands, only a handful made it back to Kamakura alive. Most surrendered or vanished. Within just a week of Ashikaga Takauji's open rebellion, the shogunate had lost most of its army. The balance had shifted. For Ashikaga Takauji, it was a stunning triumph. For Emperor Go-Daigo, who now rode back into Kyoto, the dream of restoring imperial power seemed closer than ever. His second uprising was on the verge of success. For the Hojo, the nightmare was only just beginning. Their centuries-long rule teetered on the brink. Meanwhile, in Kamakura, the shogunate still had one last hope. Its main force of some 20,000 men remained intact, giving the Hojo a final chance to continue the fight. Yet that hope would soon vanish. In April 1333, just as Kyoto fell, another blow struck the Hojo from the east. Near Kamakura, the Nita clan, inspired by Emperor Go-Daigo's call to arms, rose in open rebellion. Led by Nita Yoshisada, the clan quickly rallied thousands of discontented warriors under their banner. Within weeks, Yoshisada commanded a formidable host, tens of thousands strong. In May, he launched his bold assault. Instead of attacking Kamakura's mighty mountain defenses head-on, Yoshisada led his army along the coastline, a daring maneuver that completely outflanked the Hojo's fortifications. The last shogunate army was surrounded and destroyed in a final devastating battle. Facing certain defeat, Hojo Takatoki and over 300 members of his clan gathered in a temple and ended their lives together. The Hojo were no more, and with them the Kamakura shogunate, which had ruled Japan for nearly 150 years, vanished into history. For generations, the Hojo had clung to power, usurping the authority of the shogun himself. But in the end, Hojo Takatoki fatally overestimated Ashikaga Takauji's loyalty and forgot that the Ashikaga had always been their family's greatest rival for power. Ashikaga Takauji's sudden betrayal sealed the Hojo's fate and brought a century of their rule crashing down in ruin and blood. And now we know the truth. It's said that for generations, the Ashikaga clan secretly plotted to bring down the Hojo, a plan passed down through the family heads. From the very first day he became head of the clan, Ashikaga Takauji knew of this hidden mission and fully embraced it. He even deceived his own wife, a woman of Hojo blood, to keep the plan alive. By capturing Kyoto and shattering the shogunate's main armies, Takauji emerged as the greatest hero of the uprising, and with Kyoto under his control, the puppet emperor, Kogon, who had been propped up by the Hojo, fell into his hands as well. Kogon was forced to abdicate, and for the first time in years, Japan once again had a single sovereign, Emperor Go-Daigo, the true victor of this struggle. With the Ashikaga's vast armies now pledging loyalty to him, Go-Daigo finally reclaimed real power. Through relentless effort and unimaginable risk, he achieved what only a handful of emperors in Japanese history ever managed, wresting authority back from the shogunate's iron grip. Yet behind this hard-won triumph lay a story far more complex and far more dangerous. For this victory, Emperor Go-Daigo paid a heavy price. Many of his loyal supporters were hunted down and executed by the shogunate long before they saw success. Go-Daigo himself was once exiled to a distant island, cut off from his throne and allies. To escape the shogunate's relentless armies, he hid among the rugged mountain strongholds, moving from one refuge to another with only a handful of followers, clinging to his dream of restoration against all odds. Yet in the end, he triumphed. With nearly all of Japan's warrior clans rallying to his side, Go-Daigo had finally swept away every obstacle in his path. The shogunate was gone, the ancient order restored. For the first time in generations, there would be no regents ruling in his name, no warlords overshadowing the throne. From this moment on, all of Japan would answer to him alone. For Go-Daigo, it was nothing less than a dream come true. Victory seemed certain. Yet history, as it so often does, took an unexpected turn. It was the same warrior class that had brought down the shogunate who would soon strip Go-Daigo of his hard-won power all over again. Between 1333 and 1336, Emperor Go-Daigo set about reshaping the realm. He issued sweeping reforms, redistributing land away from the warrior class and returning it to the throne, to loyal courtiers, and to the Buddhist temples that had sheltered him in exile. But these bold policies sparked deep resentment among the samurai. Not long ago, these same warriors had fought alongside the emperor, driven by anger at the shogunate's injustices. But when Go-Daigo's new court turned out to be just as unfair in their eyes, their respect for imperial authority quickly vanished. The samurai began to look for a new head, someone who could protect their interests. And naturally, all eyes turned to Ashikaga Takauji, the very man whose victory had first restored the emperor's throne. Takauji, despite once swearing loyalty to Go-Daigo, now saw an irresistible prize before him, the chance to rebuild the shogunate, this time under the Ashikaga name. In 1336, Ashikaga Takauji rose in open rebellion against the emperor he once served. He crushed old comrades like Kusunoki Masashige, who had stood firm for Go-Daigo's cause. By 1338, Takauji defeated Nita Yoshisada, the last major commander loyal to the emperor. With his rivals gone, Ashikaga Takauji became Japan's new military strongman, founding a new shogunate known to history as the Muromachi Shogunate. A second age of warrior rule had begun. Of course, the emperor who had won back power was not ready to give up. Go-Daigo fled Kyoto once more, this time to the rugged mountains south of the capital, where he set up a rival court in Yoshino. This breakaway government came to be known as the Southern Court. Meanwhile, Ashikaga Takauji wasted no time. He made the very same decision as the Hojo clan. He revived the faction of Emperor Kogon, Go-Daigo's old rival, and installed a competing line of emperors in Kyoto. This regime would be known as the Northern Court. So began Japan's Age of Division, the Nanboku-cho period. This north-south split would drag on for more than half a century, until Takauji's grandson, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, the third shogun of the Muromachi Shogunate, finally reunified the throne. In 1339, Emperor Go-Daigo died in Yoshino, consumed by anger and disappointment. He had spent a lifetime struggling to reclaim the imperial authority that was his by birthright, only to lose it again after ruling directly for just 3 short years. Go-Daigo was a charismatic ruler with unshakable will, but fatally lacking in the skills of statecraft. His reforms were sweeping but chaotic, driven by a desperate desire to reward the court nobles and temples that had suffered under the shogunate. Yet he overlooked the needs and loyalty of the samurai lords who truly held Japan's power in their hands. Having witnessed firsthand how military power could make or break an emperor's rule, he should never have underestimated it. But Go-Daigo was born to be emperor, and perhaps, deep within, he could never truly see the samurai as equals. To him, they were subjects to command, never equals to bargain with. In the end, that miscalculation would cost him his throne forever. And so we return to the central figure of our story, the ambitious Ashikaga Takauji. He rose to power on the back of a secret, brilliant rebellion against the Kamakura shogunate. Then, without hesitation, he turned his sword against the very emperor he had once sworn to protect. Yet this was just the beginning. Throughout his life, Takauji navigated endless chaos, rebellions, shifting loyalties, and brutal battles. In this swirling storm, he seized his moment. He built a new shogunate for his clan, transforming the Ashikaga into the new rulers of Japan. On his path to becoming shogun, Takauji plotted endlessly. He was a master of rebellion, an architect of betrayal. Ashikaga Takauji died in 1358. The Muromachi shogunate he founded would endure for over 2 centuries, until it too fell to the ambition of yet another ruthless upstart. In stark contrast to Ashikaga Takauji stands Kusunoki Masashige, the loyal guardian of Emperor Go-Daigo to the very end. Unlike Takauji's cunning betrayals, Masashige remained devoted until his final breath. Beyond his rare, unwavering loyalty, Kusunoki Masashige was a master of guerrilla warfare. With only a small force, he managed to tie down the mighty armies of the Hojo clan, buying precious time for the emperor's cause. Without his stubborn stand in the mountains, the Hojo might never have fallen. After his death, Kusunoki Masashige became immortalized as a symbol of loyalty. His story passed down for generations as the very ideal of samurai devotion. And what of Emperor Kogon, the puppet once backed by the Kamakura shogunate? Ironically, his line, supported by the new Ashikaga shogunate, would ultimately win the struggle for imperial succession. It is his bloodline that survives today as the sole line of Japan's emperors. Meanwhile, the direct descendants of Emperor Go-Daigo, the monarch who defied the shogunate twice, lost their claim to the chrysanthemum throne and quietly faded into the currents of history. In the end, through today's story, we've come to understand one crucial truth about Japan's history. The relationship between the samurai and the emperor was never one of natural submission. Instead, they were fierce rivals, locked in a relentless struggle for power. The emperor's military strength was so weak that he had to rely on samurai to protect and sometimes seize his authority. But loyal warriors like Kusunoki Masashige were the exception, not the rule. Most samurai followed only strength and opportunity. It was this very drive of the samurai to seize ultimate power that led to the rise of one shogunate after another, what we now call the Age of the Samurai. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.